Hello and welcome to the ORM Mastery course. This tutorial is part of a bigger course which you can access via the YouTube edition playlist link, which you'll find in the video description. If you really like this tutorial and want to learn more, then please check out our Django ORM Mastery course on Udemy. The link to the course, which will always provide the best price, can be found in the video description. In the previous tutorial, we learned how to create a custom field and started to explore some of the different customizations in the initialization parameters that can be hard-coded into and applied to our custom field. In this tutorial, we work through a small exercise building a custom field to provide ordering in our table. Ordering data is very common and is typically performed on the front end. However, saying that, there are many occasions when we need to store information about ordering, and that's typically stored within our database. Determining the order or defining the order of data in our database is typically a semi-automated process. Therefore, we need to build a custom field, which can first determine the existing ordering set in our table, and then when creating a new entry in the database, apply or assign a corresponding order number to the new data. So that's the plan. So here we're going to first create a new custom field, subclassing from an existing field, and then we're going to dig back into the field API reference and look at how we can pre-save. So pre-save, the ability for us to actually manipulate data before it is then saved into the table. So we start where we left off in the previous tutorial. So I'll just exit this. Oh, I messed that up. Okay, exit. I'll get there. Okay, so we exit that. You can see that we have a fields file from the previous tutorial. So we're just going to extend this and add some more fields. So we're going to create a new custom field in this instance. And this is the current model that we're using. The code for this, you'll find that in the tutorial resources. So I'll make the assumption that you have watched the previous tutorial. So let's just go ahead and go straight into the fields here and let's create our new custom field. So we're going to call this order, an order field. That seems appropriate. And models dot. So we're going to extend from an existing model. So here we need to first determine what type of data it is we're trying to save. So here we are trying to add new data about the ordering of whatever's been saved into our table. So typically that is a numbering system, and typically that's some sort of integer. So let's have a look at what we've got here, and we can then select an appropriate field, an existing field. So it does need to be a positive number. So that's something that we might need to consider. So let's have a look for a positive integer. So we have a positive small integer field, a positive integer field, and a big integer field. So depending on the scale of our ordering, if our ordering was going to be over 200 million or whatever, then we would need to consider potentially utilizing a different field type. So a positive field, a positive small integer field. If we take a look at the documentation, we're told its values from 0 to 32,767. You can see here that a positive integer field, well, that's a whole bunch of numbers there. And you can see if we have a much larger number, we might utilize a big integer field. So determining the right field at the start is always useful based upon what we know is going to be stored within the field. So let's just go for a positive integer field in this scenario. So we know that we need to manipulate or add data to the fields that is going to be stored into the database. So there's work that needs to be done before the data is saved. So this is the point where we need to remember this idea of inheritance and the fact that everything is going to be derived from the field class. So here in our situation or our scenario, we're building our own custom field. We're inheriting, or we're subclassing, from the positive integer field, which exists in Django already. And that's obviously inheriting everything from the field. So if we go back into a documentation and have a look at the field API reference, what we're going to find here are a load of different features that we can utilize to perform different operations. And if we go down further enough here, we can see we've got the pre-save. Sometimes this gets mixed up because pre-save is also related to signals. So we are definitely looking for this is in the documentation under fields, Django DB models field, pre-save. There is a link in this video's resources which will take you to this page if you can't find it yourself. So here you can see this is a method that helps us to prepare the values before they're saved into the database. And this, like I said at the start, is a very common feature that we might want to include in our custom field. Important to start off by understanding what parameters this method has, and that's model instance and add. Okay, so the method of our model instance is the instance of the field, and add is whether the instance is being saved to the database for the first time. Okay, so it looks like some sort of true or false Boolean. So back in our code, let's go ahead and create our method, our new function here. So this is the pre-save method. I'll just add pass now as temporary fix. So it's working. So here we have pre-save. So we know that we need to take in model, instance, and add. So that was required. And now what we need to do is think about what we need to do. So without giving you a diagram here, what we're trying to do here is in our model, we're going to add a new product, which can be anywhere, of course, or we're going to create a new order field. And that's going to equal our new custom field, which was the order field. So let's just bring that in. So just import that in, and then let's go ahead and apply that to this field. So the whole idea is every time we add new data into the product table, the order number will go up by 1. Remember, this is the order, not the order of the product, as in I'm going to order a new product. This is the ordering of the product. So the first item that gets entered into this table is going to be given the order number 1. Then we're going to add a new product. That's going to have order number 2. Now, it might be that on the front end that we design a system where we can change the ordering. That's okay. That can be saved to the database. But of course, when we add a new item to the database, we want to check what is the biggest order number, or what was the last order number used, and then we want to plus 1. So there's a few different parameters, a few different things to think about here. Let's imagine we are going to now store data into this table here. It might be that we haven't included the order number. So we're not specifying whether this needs to be included or not. We're not making this mandatory. So whenever we enter data into a database, we could specify the order number, or else we could allow the system to generate a new number for us. So that's one thing that we need to consider there. So if a number has been assigned when trying to add data to the database, then we're not going to add a number to it, of course. Now, if we were to add data to this table where we didn't specify the order number, that's when we want our code to then actually give the new piece of data an order number, and then we want to insert it into the database. So let's start with that. So if, for example, the order field hasn't been specified, so we're going to use get atch, and we're going to say the model instance, and then self.atName, attribute name. Okay, so what we're doing here, then we know that the attribute name is order. Okay, we know that the instance is going to be an instance of our product here. So what we're doing here then is we're saying if, for example, the model instance and the attribute is not set, then, so is none, then what we want to do is obviously we want to now generate a new order number. Now, if we have, when we created our query, if we have defined the order field, then obviously what we want to do is just to return, we want to just return that data and save it into the database. So just return super. Now remember, we're using super again because this is a function that's been defined in one of the classes that we're inheriting from. So we're just basically just making this override. So we want to basically just take this function from the other class, and we want to override it with our new data here. So super.presave, and then we're going to need to pass back our model instance and the add. There we go. Okay, so that's what we've got so far. Hopefully that is making sense at this point. So now we need to, if, for example, when we create a query, we don't include the order field, we want to obviously now create a new order number. So let's use a try except in this case. So we want to try and add a new number, except. Yeah, we want to try and add a new number. So we want to find out what is the biggest number, say, or the last number utilized in the ordering field, and we want to add 1. Now, for example, if we don't have any data in our database at all, then obviously we're not going to be able to perform that function. The try is not going to work correctly. So the except will then come into play. So where we enter data into a new table, we're going to need to apply a value, the first value. So let's go for object does not exist. So if we get this exception where the object does not exist, because obviously we're going to search for data in our table and then add 1 to the order. Now, obviously, if there's no data in the database, that's not going to happen. So we're going to capture that error, and we're going to specify value equals 1. So that's going to be the first value used in the order field. And of course, once that happens, we then need to set the attribute. So let's do that. So let's set the attribute. So that's going to be the particular model instance that we're working with. We're going to need to change the attribute, add the attribute name, sorry. So we're essentially just adding this value now to the query that was created where the value wasn't added initially. And then we'll go ahead and add the value. So what we have now then, let's pretend we created a new query. We've added the name and the product ID, but we haven't specified the order. So we send that off to run the query. What happens now then? Okay, so first of all, we capture the fact that we haven't added the order in the query. And then what we try and do then in a second is we're going to add some code which is going to look for all the existing data in the table, look for the values that have been set in the order, and then add 1. Now, obviously, at this point, we don't have any data in our model, so that's not going to work. So what happens is that we cause this error here, object does not exist, and we define manually the value that equals 1. So that's the first order number in our table. Right, so now what we need to do is actually set that data, so set attribute. So we're going to build that and add that to the query, the initial query. So now our initial query now includes the name, the product ID, and the order. That was what we just generated here with the set attribute here. So we've added that value. That value is going to be 1. And then what we want to do is return all of that, return value. Okay, and there we go. So that will then add that new entry into the table. Yeah. So the final component here is that we're going to need to check the table for all the existing order numbers and then add 1. So let's say object. So we want to return so self.models.objects let's get the latest number. So we use the latest feature to filter out. So we're going to get the latest value in the table for the order column. And then what we're going to do is then going to have, say, value equals object dot order. So what we're doing here, we make a query, we return from the database the instance in the database which has the highest value, the highest order number, or the highest order number. Okay, so now we return one object from our table, and inside of that object is obviously the order field. So we go into that order field and then we get that number. So essentially what we've done there is we grab that number, and that's the highest order number currently in our table. And then what we do there is we just add 1 to it, and then we save that as value. So now we have our new object number. So once we had that in place, we can then go ahead and return. So we try that, everything works okay, and then obviously we return the value. Okay, and there we have it. So let's just give this a run. We need to import this in. So let's do that. I just do it here rather than at the top. So from Django.core.exceptions, yep, let's import object does not exist. There we go. So we can capture that error. Right, so with that in place, now let's remember we got the new field. So I think we've already done this. Let's go back into our models. We've imported the order field. We made that available. We've created now a new field called order. Right, because we've already migrated, I'm just going to make sure that I've closed everything here. And then I'm just going to remove the migration, the initial migration that we created in the previous tutorial, and the database. Okay, so now we're ready to go ahead and make migrations. And let's go ahead and migrate. Everything looks to be okay. Let's take a look at the migration here. You can see inside the file here, we're going to create an order field. That's using the order field custom field. Let's give this a go. So let's go into the shell. Let's go ahead and import our table. I'm going to add some new data. So from ecommerce.models, let's import product, and then let's build a new instance. So product name equals test, and then we have a mandatory field in models. Just double check this. Product ID equals 1, 2, 4. And there we go. Right. Now, let's not forget, in actual fact, this is a character field, isn't it? So it's not an integer field. So product ID. Okay, so we want to put that into a variable. So x equals, okay. And now we can go ahead and save that, x.save. Okay, so order field object has no attribute models. Right. So that's a little typo there. I do apologize. I should have seen that because it's highlighted here in white. So it should say self dot model objects, not models, models. So I appended that on line 19. So let's just go back into our shell here. Let's try that again. So just create our data, just pressing up and down on the keyboard. X, okay. So object has no models. Okay, so that's line 19. So let's just exit that and let's do that again. Apologies. So let's go back into the shell, just using up and down. So let's go ahead and bring in our product again. Our product has not been defined. Of course it's not. So from e-commerce models, import product. Let's go ahead and add our data. So x equals product name test product ID. And then let's go for x.save. There we go. So now we can inspect that. So I'll right click on my database here, assuming you've got the SQLite extension installed. Open the database. And let's open up our product table at the bottom here. We should now see our data now stored. You can see that the first number has been applied, and that's number 1. So let's just go back. We'll just add some more data. This needs to be unique. So let's save that. And I'll just update my database again. Right click, and you can now see we have a new ordering, which is 2. So like we've seen in the code, and we've set it up so that we can actually add ordering. So let's just add ordering here. So order equals, and let's give it a number 10, for example. Okay, so let's try that, x.save. So what should happen here is that the code here should, the if statement would return false. Then the else would then run, so we simply just save the instance. So let's give this a go. I had to think about that. Okay, so unique has failed. Apologies. We just need to change this product ID to be something a little bit more unique. And then try that again. There we have it. So let's refresh. So hopefully this time we now have a new order with number 10. So whenever we now save any more data, we need to just change the product ID. And let's just remove the order from the query here. So whenever we save this, hopefully now that's going to be order number 11. So we'll just refresh. And there we go. The actual details and how this works is kind of irrelevant. The important part here is that we've learned now how to create a new custom field and potentially utilize the pre-save method here to consider how to manipulate our data before we then insert it into the database. So on reflection, we don't actually need to include the set attribute here, because what we've got to remember is that this field, or this is a field that we're working on. So whenever we save data, this is referring to explicitly the field that we're working from, and that's the order field. So that's what we're grabbing here. Remember, when we get the attribute, we're essentially getting the order field. We're checking to make sure that if someone has actually added the order field in the query. So we are always referring to the order field. So what is returned is the value that's appropriate to store within this particular field. And obviously this field is a positive integer field, so we're returning the value 1, which is compatible with the field type that we are utilizing. So we don't need the set attribute, apologies. We can remove that, and that pretty much then is the final code in this instance. So there we have a custom field, which includes a method which can manipulate the data before it's saved into the field.